Okay, so what do we know so far? We know that the definition of a human being is a creature in whom the mind influences the emotions. A human being is someone who has intelligent emotions. Some angels have only intelligence but no emotions. Some angels have emotions but no intelligence. Animals have emotions and some intelligence, but the intelligence does not influence the emotion. Only in the human being are the emotions intelligent, if we bring the influence of the intelligence to the emotions. What makes reality? When we look at something, when we hear something, we experience something, we either dismiss it as a passing occurrence, an idle thought, an interesting, maybe pleasant emotion, but not reality. And then at times we experience something and we know that that's the truth. Ain't that the truth? What makes something real? There are a number of possibilities for different kinds of people. You have two people sharing an experience, and one of them comes away knowing that that's reality, and the other one, just a passing experience. So, when we say, for example, that a certain individual is an intellectual, what do we mean by that? It doesn't necessarily mean that he's intelligent, because there are many intelligent people who are not intellectuals. They're bright, they may even be geniuses, but they're not intellectuals. One of the reasons is because although they're bright, although they're very intelligent, they don't live by their intelligence. That's not what governs their life and their behavior. They're very intelligent, but when it comes to actions, they don't act so intelligent. They may be very intelligent, but when it comes to emotions, they're childish. They're immature, not intelligent. So the first definition of an intellectual is not how smart a person is, but whether he lives by his knowledge. To a person who is truly an intellectual, a convincing argument, a compelling argument, is more powerful than putting a gun to his head. If you are truly an intelligent creature, not you have intelligence, you live intelligently, then if you have an argument, if someone gives you an argument and proves to you that the right thing to do is to climb the hill, climb the mountain, then you are more compelled to climb that mountain than if somebody put a gun to your head and said, climb the mountain or I'll shoot you. If a person puts a gun to your head and says, climb the mountain or I'll shoot you, you got a technical problem. You don't have to climb the mountain. You got to get rid of the shooter. But if you are logically convinced that the right thing to do is to climb the mountain, there's no way that you're going to resist. You got to do it. Why do you have to do it? Because it makes sense. So, an intellectual is not someone who has a good argument. An intellectual is someone for whom a good argument creates reality. If it makes sense, then that's real. Everything else is maybe. Contrast that with an emotional person. Again, an emotional person is not someone who gets angry, who falls in love intensely. An emotional person is someone for whom the emotions equal life. In his mind and in his experience, emotions are what life is all about. So it's not just he has an emotion, he experiences emotion. It's life. That to him is reality. So if he hates somebody, well then that's reality. That's it. That person has got to go. Why? Because I hate him. And when I hate somebody, that's it. That is the reality of things. So you can give me logical arguments that I shouldn't hate him, that I shouldn't harm him, that he is necessary, that he's good for other things. Doesn't work. He's got to go. Because my feelings tell me that he must go. And what my feelings tell me, that's reality. Everything else is maybe. Contrast that with what we call a hedonist. To the hedonist, if it tastes good, it looks good, it feels good, it sounds good, well then that's real. That's real. Everything else is maybe. Do you love? Do you hate? That's nothing. Love comes and goes. That's nothing. Is it logical? Does it make sense? Yeah, it makes sense. It doesn't make sense. What's the difference? That's just mind games. But if it tastes good, well, that's reality. So the hedonist is not someone who enjoys good food. To the hedonist, the senses are what determine reality. If you can see it, it's real. You feel it? I don't know what that is. Indigestion? You worked it out logically? Well, what is that? Some kind of game? But if you see it, if you've touched it, if you've tasted it, well, that's real. That's real. What is the whole principle, the notion of reality? You have people come to class, come to discussions, and they're really frustrated. Because they hear, they read, they've studied, they've gone to school, and they don't know what's real. You ever have that feeling? All right, so I've heard both sides of the argument. Now, what's real? What's really going on? But tell me really. Don't just give me an explanation. Really, what? How do I know it's real? First, let's define what that means. What is real? You love, but do you really love? You understand, but do you really understand? You saw it, but did you really see it? I don't mean, did you actually see it? You saw, but it's still not real to you. Like I see it, but I can't believe it. I understand it, but I'm not convinced. I feel it, but I'm not sure. What is this ingredient, this thing called real? Whether we get to it through our mind, like an intellectual, or we get to it through our feelings like an emotional person, or we get to it through our senses like the hedonist. What is it? In the soul, there are functions, as we've spoken before. The soul can function intelligently, it can function emotionally, it can think, it can speak. These are activities. The soul can want, the soul can enjoy. Which of these activities feels like the soul itself. That which feels like the soul itself, that's real. Because the soul itself doesn't do things, it just is what it is. And that feels real. So when something rings true, what does that mean? That doesn't just sound good, that sounds that sounds true. What does that mean? The soul itself is pure, real soul. The soul in itself knows itself, and that's real. When the soul does something, is it still real? Or have you stepped away from reality? You know, for example, there are certain people who are very stingy. They're selfish, they're wrapped up in themselves, they're stingy people. But you see them do something very kind and generous. What's your first thought? This is not them. This is not them. Like the comedian who says, the grandparents come and they're so nice to the grandchildren, but they were not nice to their own children. So the parents say to their children, this old guy, he's not the guy who raised me. This is not the real person. He's acting nice, but he's not nice. Activity can be out of character, can be untrue. You can be stingy and act generous. You can be generous and at times act stingy, hopefully for a good reason. You can be angry and act as if you're not. You can not be angry and act as if you are. You can actually be angry, but it's not a true anger, because 10 minutes from now it'll be gone. So, the activities of the soul are either expressing the soul itself, and then it is true, because the soul is true, or the activities are not expressing the soul. It's just an activity. And then it's not true. Take it or leave it. This brings us to the issue of faith. What does it mean when you say you believe? Right? I believe with perfect faith in the coming of Mashiach. You do what? I believe. I believe that Mashiach is coming. What does it mean you believe? You think? You hope? You trust? What does it mean? I believe with perfect faith means I am more certain that Mashiach is coming than that the sun will come up tomorrow morning. I don't believe the sun is going to come up tomorrow. I hope it will. I trust it will because it has almost every day in the past. So it'll probably come up again. But do I believe it? No. There's certainly no mitzvah to believe that the sun is going to come up in the morning. But there is a mitzvah to believe that Mashiach is coming, which means you have to be more convinced, more certain, more absolutely confident that Mashiach is coming than that the sun will come up. So believing doesn't mean I think, I hope. No, it means absolute certitude. Where does that come from? How do you get to know something so convincingly without any proof at all? Without any experience? No one has ever experienced Mashiach. So where does this faith come from? Faith can come from one of two places. And that's why we have true faith and we have false faith, or false gods. What is a false god? It doesn't necessarily mean a statue that you bow to. It doesn't necessarily mean worshiping the sun or the earth or the powers of nature. A false god means a false belief. You think you believe. It feels like you believe, but you're not believing. You're actually doing something else. For example, you can believe in something because you want to. You believe that your mother loves you because you want to. You believe you're going to get up in the morning because you want to believe it. It would be very uncomfortable to live your life wondering whether you're going to get up in the morning. That would be terrible. So because it feels wrong and bad to have to worry about it, we prefer to believe that we're going to get up in the morning, and that makes life easier. It makes sleeping easier. If you weren't sure you're getting up in the morning, you wouldn't sleep so good. So in order to get a good night's sleep, you have to believe with absolute faith that you're going to wake up in the morning refreshed, better than you are now. In other words, there are certain things we believe because we need to. And that's why there is some justification to the argument that all faith comes from wanting. All religion, all belief, all faith is a crutch. You're afraid to go to sleep at night, so you convince yourself that you will absolutely, without a question, wake up in the morning. You're afraid to live your life on your own and face the world on your own, so you believe in a God who watches over you and protects you. You're believing it because you want to. So it's your will, your desire, that creates the belief. According to this, you could believe anything. Anything you wish is true, you can convince yourself that it is. But this is a figment of your want. It is not true faith. Does this make sense? So why would a person say, I am absolutely convinced and I trust with all my heart and soul that when I die I will go to heaven? You don't know that. How can you be so sure? How can you tell me that you are certain when you don't even have an explanation? You don't even know what heaven looks like. You don't know what it feels like. And yet you're sure you're going there? How can this be? So the question really is, you're an intelligent human being. In all other areas of life, you make sense. You talk sense. If you have a position and an opinion, it's based on some logic and some reason and some knowledge and some experience. And it comes to this subject, all of a sudden, it doesn't have to make sense. You don't have to be reasonable. You don't have to have a good argument. You just believe it. Why did you choose to put your brain aside and accept this as an absolute truth? It didn't come from your senses, even if you're a hedonist. Your senses can't tell you that you're going to go to heaven. It doesn't come from your emotions, even if you're an emotional person. It doesn't come from your intelligence, even if you're an intellectual. So where is it coming from? What made this real? The answer is your will. You want it to be real. Previous Rabbi was arrested by the communists a number of times. The last time was the most serious, and after that he had to leave Russia. When they came to arrest him, they did a search in the house, in the Rebbe's house. And the Rebbe's daughters were there. And they were searching the daughter's room. And one of the daughters was criticizing or arguing with this official. And she said, "Why do you think that because you have a bigger fist that you can break into the house of a scholar and disrupt his life? Where is your respect?" The Rebbe writes in his diary that he heard his daughter putting up this argument and resisting the intimidation, and he was very proud of her. But at the same time, he said to her, "That's your will speaking. You don't really think that you can reason with this guy. You can't. He's full of hatred, and he's not going to listen to a rational argument, and you can't expect him to have respect. Yet, you're making this argument because you so desperately want to save me from being arrested that your will makes you believe that you could actually convince him. But it's just your will speaking, nothing else." When you want, you can create a faith. Because will doesn't have to listen to the mind or to the heart or to the experience. Will can dictate. Will acts unilaterally. You want, you do. Will is unreasonable. That's both its negative side and its positive side. There are times when it is good to be unreasonable, and there are times, most times, when it's not good to be unreasonable. But that's what will is. So, if your belief comes from your want, this is called a false God. Maybe this is why every religion offers a reward, consequences. You come to somebody and say, "I want you to believe that a certain statue is the master of the universe." Now, why would you believe that? Can you prove it? No. Can you explain it? No. You just have to accept it on faith. Well, why would I do that? Why would I want to believe it? So in order to get us to want to believe it, every idol, every statue, every religion, every faith comes with a reward. You want enlightenment? Believe in Buddhism. You want to get to heaven and be saved from Satan? Believe in Christianity. Why does a religion have to offer a reward? Why does God have to offer a reward? Isn't he real enough and good enough on his own? Isn't what he says true enough to stand on its own? Why the reward? Possibly because in order for you to believe something, you have to want to. Well, what's going to make you want to? Some huge reward. Eternal life. It's a nice reward. What then is real faith? What makes something real to a believer? We spoke about the hedonist and the emotional person and the intellectual person and the willful person. Now let's speak about the believer. What is real to a believer is that which he believes. If it's part of my faith, it's real. What does that mean? Faith works like this. Our soul is older than our intelligence, so to speak. First there's a soul, then there's intelligence. First there's a soul, then there is will. We don't know everything the soul knows. We don't have the energy that the soul has. Because the soul is much greater, more powerful than the body or the mind or the heart can contain. So if the soul expressed itself fully, unleashed its power, we would go insane, we would become hysterical, emotionally hysterical, and we would physically burn out because we can't handle that kind of energy. So the soul communicates with the body in bite-sized, manageable pieces. A little intelligence, a little emotion, a little feeling, senses, but not too much. There are people who, after an accident, physical accident, a car accident, become psychic. They suddenly know what's going to happen tomorrow. They know what the people in the room are thinking. They remember their past lives. All of a sudden they know stuff. They see, they hear what nobody else sees or hears. And it does make them crazy. Unless they learn how to handle it. But just the experience itself is overwhelming and disturbing because we only need to know a little bit. When we know more than we need to know, it's not good for us. So we can't feel everything the soul feels. We can't know everything the soul knows because the brain and the heart are much smaller than the soul. What does the soul know? What does the soul see? What does the soul feel? The soul knows, feels, and sees its creator. Because a soul is a spiritual thing. That awareness, that which is so real to the soul, trickles down to us if we allow it. If you're in touch with your soul, then you hear what your soul hears, and you see what your soul sees. And to your soul, God is more real than the creation. Obviously, the Creator is more real than His creation. Real faith means not I think. Real faith means I hear what my soul knows. So what is it that I'm believing? I believe there's a God? Not quite. I believe what my soul knows. I trust my soul. And my soul sees God. My soul feels for God. My soul understands God. And I trust my soul. If that's the nature of faith, if that's what believing means, then you can't believe in anything. There are only certain things that your soul knows. If you're hearing that, then that's what you believe. But you can't just make up a faith. That's not what your soul is telling you. So if you're listening to your soul, you can't have a false God. This makes sense? You can't wake up one morning and say, you know what? I'm going to start believing in trees. That's not coming from your soul. So you can't do that. You're not going to have a real faith in trees. Real faith is only that which comes from your soul's experience. Your soul experiences God, that's what you're going to believe. Your soul does not experience trees or statues or the sun and the moon, because your soul is older than them. Now we'll understand something very significant. What is the central, most expressive sentence in Jewish prayer? The statement that tells us exactly where we stand. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. That is a statement of our faith in the oneness of God. But listen how it's worded. Hear, O Israel. Who are we talking to? Who are we talking to? The statement was originally made by the children of Jacob, by Yaakov's children, when they assured him, they assured their father that their faith was intact and that they believed what he believed. And so they said to him, "Hear, O Israel," because that was his name. "We believe what you believe. God is one." But when we say it, who are we talking to? We're talking to our own soul. And we say to our soul, "I heard you. I got it. I see clearly now." So you assure your own soul that yes, you do agree, or you've heard, or you've accepted what the soul knows. Then you are sure that this is a true faith, not a faith produced by will. Of course, if you have people who don't believe in a soul, then they're going to assume that all faith comes from will. But then again, if you don't believe in a soul, you don't understand anything. If you don't believe in a soul, then communism doesn't make sense either. So without a soul, we don't understand anything. With a soul, things begin to make sense. So now we have this list of reality checks, reality perception. At the bottom of the ladder, we have the reality of the hedonist. If I can see it, then it's real. I've seen it, so it must be real. I feel my own existence. I'm here. I'm real. I don't know about God, because I can't see him. If I can't see it, it's not real. That's the hedonist. Then you have the romantic. If I feel it, if I respond to it emotionally, then it must be real. You've got to be a bad person. Otherwise, why would I hate you? So the fact that I hate you proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are really evil. If I love you, then you must be wonderful. You have to be wonderful. How else could I love you if you weren't wonderful? So if I love you, that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt you're good. You're important. How do I know? Because I love you. What I love is really good. What I hate is really bad. How can you ask me to love someone I don't love? If I love, I love. If I don't, I don't. That's reality. Well, maybe you should love your neighbor. Maybe you should love your husband, your wife. What kind of foolish? Maybe I should? That's nonsense talk. Let's talk reality. Reality is I don't love them. That's real. Maybe I should. Then you have the intellectual. To the intellectual, a sound reasoning, a sound argument, a compelling argument, that's so real. 2 and 2 has to be 4 because that's what makes sense. 2 and 2 is 5. My head is not comfortable with that. I can't figure it out. And if I can't figure it out, it's not real. If it makes sense to me, it must be real. It must be real. There's a famous story about a guy who was trying to escape from Russia. And he smuggled himself into a refrigerated car on a train that was going to Switzerland. And he calculated, being a scientist, he calculated exactly how long he could survive in a refrigerated car before he died from asphyxiation. And he kept a record, hour by hour, his symptoms, as he was losing his breath and so on. And he died. He did not survive the trip because it took longer than he had calculated, and there wasn't enough air in the sealed car for him to survive. And so he didn't make it. He died. The strange thing is, the car was not refrigerated and it was not sealed. It had been a refrigerated car, but it was no longer used that way. There was plenty of air. But in his mind, he was so convinced that he actually died because his mind told him that that's what's supposed to happen. And of course, that's an unusual case. But that would be a true intellectual. Reality is determined by what your mind tells you. Then there's the fourth person. To him, reality is determined by what I want. If I want it, then it has to be. Then it's real. If I don't want it, it's not real, it's not important, doesn't matter. Not only to me, to anybody. If I don't want it, then the fact that you want it only makes you foolish. Because you want something you don't need. You claim you need it? Not possible. I don't want it, so it's not real. And this is, of course, where married couples get into trouble. What do you mean you want? You don't really want. No, I really want. Give me a break. You can't really want. Why? Because I don't want. And if I don't want, then it's not real. And if you keep insisting that you do want what I don't want, it just proves that you're not all there. You should go see somebody professionally. Because my perception of reality is determined by what I want. And I don't want that. I've never wanted that. So anybody who wants it is a little off. Is living in fantasy land. And that's just as strong as the hedonist who looks at the intellectual and says, what is wrong with you? So what if it doesn't make sense? It tastes good, do it. You can't? You're a sick person. And the intellectual says, how could you do that? How could you do that? It's not right. And you see how they can't communicate? Not because they disagree, not because they have different opinions. Their reality is different. Each of them is abnormal to the other, not just wrong. You have two intellectuals arguing. They each insist that the other is wrong, not crazy. But when you have a hedonist arguing with an intellectual, they're both convinced that the other one is simply not normal, out of touch with reality. And then you have the fifth level, and that is the person to whom all reality and truth comes from what his soul knows, what his soul feels. If it's true for my soul, that's true. Otherwise, it's all a matter of opinion. Otherwise, it's debatable. You love, so you love. Doesn't mean it's important. You hate, so you hate. Doesn't mean that you're right. What are we supposed to love? What are we supposed to hate? That's real. It makes sense to you, it doesn't make sense to you. That's all debatable, negotiable. That's not reality. Reality is, what are you supposed to think? You want and you don't want. That's insignificant. That's petty and trivial. What's real is what you're supposed to want. Now, this all sounds very profound, but in fact, it's an everyday experience. If you're raising children, This is exactly what you're telling them. Maybe not in these words. The child says, but I don't want to. And you say, but you're supposed to. You got to go to school. I don't want to go to school. Well, you may want to, you may not want to, but you have to go to school. Well, I hate school. Well, you hate, you love, but you got to go to school. Why do you have to go to school? That's another subject. Is that the ultimate truth? No, but it's a truth bigger than a child's will. It's a truth greater than a child's feelings. My teacher is stupid. Well, there are certain things greater than your opinion. As a 4-year-old, you're not qualified to determine who is stupid and who is intelligent, and who's a good teacher and who is not a good teacher. So we're actually telling our children there is something more real than what you're feeling, than what you're wanting, than what you're understanding, and than what you're tasting. Hopefully, that reality that we're telling them to sacrifice all of the above, to sacrifice their opinion and their emotions and their wants and their experiences, hopefully what we're asking them to sacrifice for really is more important. And it's not just what we want them to believe. And that's why it's so important to quote to your children. Don't just say you're not allowed to steal. Quote, God doesn't want you to steal. Now you're using the language of the child's soul. That's what the soul knows. So don't say, how many times have I told you not to steal? That's not relevant. What's the difference, how many times? The question is not stealing an absolute truth? The only way it can be an absolute truth is if your soul knows that you're not allowed to steal, that God doesn't want it. So when you say to a child, God doesn't want you to steal, there's a faint memory, there's a faint familiarity to that statement because someplace in the child's soul, those same words already exist. Thou shalt not steal. And again, this is what we mean. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. My soul knows, now I know also. My soul is certain, now I'm certain too. That's called real faith. And that's the kind of reality that we should strive for. So going back to what we talked about earlier. The mind guides us. We're not victims to influences and whims. We guide ourselves intelligently. Which of the 5 realities should a person live by? Should reality be sensual perception? Should reality be determined by our emotions? If I don't love my wife, then she's not really a wife. Then we're not really married. If you don't love your mother, so she's not really a mother. Is that how it works? Is reality determined by our emotions? Is reality determined by our intelligence? If I never heard about it and it doesn't make sense, then it can't be real. Is that true? So there are no germs because you've never seen one? So there are no electrons because you can't catch it? That's foolish. Is reality determined by what you want? That's not only foolish, that's dangerous. That's false gods. So, what should we look to tell us what is real? And the best way to think about it, what do you tell your children and your grandchildren? What can you say to them with absolute certainty? That Pluto is one of the 9 planets? You can't say that for sure. What we ought to believe in and trust in, what we ought to perceive as reality, is that which is real with or without me. That which is real, whether I'm intelligent or not, whether I have feelings or not, whether I want anything or not. What is real has got to be more real than me. I have to receive reality from wherever it is, because it's got to be more real than me. Otherwise, what do I need it for? So the search for truth and the search for reality means I want to find something that is more true, more real than I am. Well, how am I going to do that? With my intelligence? I want something more real than my intelligence. Like somebody once said, if I can understand God, then I go looking for another one. I don't want a God that I can understand. What kind of God is he if I can understand him? How real can something be if it's the result of my experience? That can't be very real. So I want something more real than me. Where do I get something more real than me? If it truly comes from outside of me, then it's not my experience. I want to have something real. Of course, it has to be more real than me, but I have to have it. If it's God in heaven, then I don't have it. Then it's not available to me. So yes, God is real, but what does that do for me? So the reality that we live by is the reality of our soul, but the part of our soul that is more real than us. Does that make any sense? There's a part of your soul that is itself before you tamper with it, before you try to reason it, before you try to feel it, just itself. So, how do you get that information? How does what the soul knows trickle down to you? This is called refinement. And that's the next big subject. What does refinement mean? Refinement means developing a sensitivity. Refinement means allowing the light to shine through. Refinement is like a log that doesn't burn because it's too dense, so you shave it down into little pieces and then it catches fire. Refinement means making the part of you that is not so true delicate enough for what the soul knows to resonate in you. It means getting rid of our coarseness. It means getting rid of our insensitivities. It means getting rid of our cynicism. It means getting rid of our fears, our resistances. Let it be. Let your soul talk. And make yourself sensitive enough to hear it. That's called refinement. You have these silly examples. You don't appreciate a good wine? A very expensive, really good wine, and it tastes like mud to you? Well, that's because you haven't refined your taste buds, whatever that means. You don't feel the difference? You can't tell the difference between two perfumes? They all smell alike to you? Well, that's because you haven't refined your sense of smell. But that's silly refinement. Real refinement means when a person makes themselves more receptive to what is true and holy and eternal. That means things like not being indifferent, allowing yourself to care, allowing yourself to be moved, to be touched. Americans don't like to do that. We have a very strong resistance. We're all pioneers. We can't afford to be so delicate and so sensitive. We can't allow people to get to us and things to bother us because, like, if you live in a big city, you let things bother you, you're not going to survive. If you don't desensitize, you're going to be overwhelmed. So we desensitize. You can't care about every guy who sleeps in the street. It's too much. You can't get upset every time you hear in the news that somebody got killed, even if he's Jewish. It's just too much. You can't love your wife unconditionally. What kind of demands she's going to make on you? You got to put your foot down. Self-preservation. Refinement means you let yourself feel. Refinement means you think more refined, more delicate, more sensitive. You speak more refined, more particular about how you express yourself. Vulgarity in language deadens the soul. Well, it doesn't deaden the soul, it deadens you to your soul. And inappropriate behavior is not a refining factor. On the contrary, it coarsens the person. And that's why we get upset with our children, even if they're behaving properly, but they're not showing any signs of sensitivity. There's nothing delicate. They're callous. They're careless. It's not good. We worry about it. It's very nice when a person says what's on his mind, but then again, it's not so nice. That's a sign of a lack of refinement. You're not selective. Whatever happens to be on your mind, that's what comes out in your speech. That's not a mindful behavior. So again, a human being uses his mind to guide him towards what is correct and proper and true. Not only in his emotions, but also in his perception of reality. Choose the reality you're going to believe in, even if it doesn't come natural. Just like you have to choose the right emotions, even if they're not already there. That's a healthy person. Now we understand what a person is. And this goes way beyond psychology.